Marriage, as it has traditionally been understood, is often framed as a lifelong commitment, a vow sealed before community, law, or God, meant to persist till death do us part. But beneath the ceremonial promises and social constructs lies a deeper psychological and spiritual question, one that Carl Jung, the great depth psychologist, would have urged us to ask. Is marriage truly meant to be for life, or is it meant to be a vehicle for transformation? When we understand human beings not as fixed entities, but as evolving souls navigating the complexities of psyche and shadow, the idea of a permanent union becomes far more nuanced than our cultural fairy tales suggest. From a Jungian perspective, marriage is not merely a social contract. It is a dynamic arena of projection, confrontation, and ultimately, individuation. We do not marry a person. We marry a mirror of our unconscious. Every argument, every resentment, every emotional trigger within a marriage is not just about the other, it's about ourselves. Jung believed that what we repress or fail to integrate within ourselves, we inevitably project onto our partners. This projection gives birth to the initial chemistry and later transforms into conflict. That very tension becomes the fuel for psychological growth, if we are courageous enough to face it. The romantic ideal that love conquers all often dies a slow death in marriage. But it does not die because love fails. It dies because our idea of love was never grounded in reality to begin with. We believed love was emotional comfort, endless validation, and mutual pleasure. But love, in the deepest psychological and spiritual sense, is not comfort, it is fire. It burns away illusions, reveals wounds, and demands the death of the ego. This is why Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And a long-term relationship, more than any other structure, holds up that mirror daily. Many modern marriages fall apart not because the love is gone, but because the illusion is. The projection phase, the time when we see our partner not as they are, but as who we unconsciously need them to be, eventually wears off. When that happens, we are confronted with the real person. But more terrifyingly, we are confronted with our own unmet needs, traumas, and patterns that we once projected onto them. This stage, known in Jungian psychology as the withdrawal of projections, is often when couples believe they have fallen out of love, but in truth, they have fallen out of delusion and into reality. The question is not whether marriage is meant to last a lifetime, but whether it is meant to last through multiple psychological deaths and rebirths. A marriage that does not evolve becomes a prison. It is possible to stay married in the legal sense and yet be emotionally, spiritually, and sexually dead within the union. This is not commitment. This is emotional stagnation. True commitment is not to the idea of permanence. It is to truth, growth, and the willingness to evolve alongside another soul who is also transforming. And sometimes, growth requires release, not attachment. In many ways, the traditional concept of marriage is a container. Like a crucible in alchemy, it holds the intense fires of transformation. But not all containers are meant to last forever. Some are meant to serve a purpose, complete a lesson, and dissolve. To shame those who leave a marriage as failures is to misunderstand the entire point of the soul's journey. In Jungian terms, individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, may demand that you break free from the very structure that once served your awakening. There is no one-size-fits-all answer to the question, is marriage for life? For some, yes. It can be a lifelong journey of mutual evolution, shadow work, and soulful companionship. But for many others, marriage is a temporary vessel designed to reflect what must be healed, to bring forth buried parts of the self, and ultimately, to prepare both partners for deeper selfhood. Just as the caterpillar must leave behind the cocoon, many people must eventually leave behind a marriage that no longer supports their psychological expansion. Our cultural obsession with permanence is rooted in fear. We fear death, we fear change, and we fear abandonment. But all of nature is built on cycles: birth, death, rebirth. Trees shed leaves, rivers change course, even the stars collapse. Why, then, do we demand that love remain frozen in time? Real love is fluid, not fixed. It evolves, and sometimes it completes. And that completion is not a failure. It is a sacred ending. From a psychological standpoint, staying in a marriage out of fear, guilt, or duty is one of the most powerful betrayals of the self. Jung emphasized that the self, our core, divine essence, must be honored above all external constructs. If a marriage becomes a battlefield of manipulation, repression, and emotional death, staying is not noble, it is self-abandonment. True union cannot exist where one or both partners are slowly eroding under the weight of denial. We must distinguish between egoic attachment and soulful connection. The ego clings, the soul surrenders. The ego says, "You are mine forever." The soul says, "We walk together until the path splits, and then I bless your journey." In this way, even separation can be an act of love. It can be the ultimate form of letting go, not out of resentment, but out of reverence for both souls' continued evolution. Jung warned that we often confuse merging with love. In the early stages of romance, we lose ourselves in the other. This is natural and even beautiful, but it is not sustainable. Eventually, the soul demands its own return. Individuation calls us back to wholeness, not as halves of a couple, but as integrated beings. A marriage that allows for this dance between union and individuation can thrive. A marriage that resists it will eventually break the individuals within it. So, is marriage really for life? If by life we mean the biological span of two humans legally bound, perhaps. But if by life we mean the life of the soul, the psychological and spiritual journey of becoming, then the answer depends. It depends on the capacity of both partners to do shadow work, to confront their projections, to communicate authentically, to change and allow the other to change. It depends on whether the container of the marriage remains sacred, flexible, and transformative. Let us move beyond the binary of successful marriage and failed marriage. Let us instead ask, did I grow? Did I love truly? Did I become more of who I am meant to be? If the answer is yes, then the relationship was sacred, no matter how long it lasted. The soul does not measure in years, it measures in awakenings. The more psychologically aware we become, the less interested we are in appearances, and the more committed we are to depth. A 50-year marriage that is dead inside is not a triumph. A 3-year union that cracked your heart open and set you on your path may be the greatest spiritual event of your life. Depth, not duration, is the real metric of soulful love. Carl Jung believed that life was a process of becoming whole. Every person we love, marry, lose, or leave is part of that wholeness. They are not mistakes. They are mirrors. They are guides. They are the very agents of our transformation. To cling to them beyond the season of truth is to resist that transformation. And when we resist transformation, we resist life itself. So to those who are married and questioning, ask not whether it should last, but whether it is growing. To those who are divorced, release the shame. You did not fail, you evolved. And to those who still dream of a lifelong love, understand that love is not about duration. It is about depth, presence, and the willingness to face yourself in the mirror of another again and again. The illusion of permanence in relationships is often reinforced by societal scripts that equate longevity with success and separation with failure. But Carl Jung would argue that the measure of a relationship lies not in its length, but in its capacity to serve the individuation process. In a culture obsessed with appearances and stability, this truth is uncomfortable. Not every marriage is meant to last forever, and not every ending is tragic. Sometimes, endings are initiations into deeper levels of self-awareness, maturity, and soulful autonomy. What many fail to recognize is that long-term intimacy is not just a romantic endeavor, it is a psychological crucible. Your partner becomes the stage upon which your childhood wounds play out, your unconscious fears reveal themselves, and your buried traumas emerge. This is not a flaw of marriage. This is its spiritual purpose. Without this friction, there is no fuel for transformation. So when we ask if marriage is for life, we must also ask, are we willing to die and be reborn again and again within the relationship? Or are we clinging to static identities that can no longer contain our truth? Marriage, in its most sacred form, is a commitment to evolution, not comfort. If one or both individuals resist growth, the relationship begins to rot from the inside. The resentment builds, the intimacy dies, and the relationship becomes a shell, a mask, a performance. We must ask ourselves, what are we really honoring? The bond or the illusion of the bond? If we stay out of fear, guilt, or image management, we are not honoring love. We are betraying it. Consider how the unconscious animus and anima, Jung's terms for the inner masculine and feminine, often shape our romantic choices. A man may marry a woman who represents his anima projection, an embodiment of his idealized feminine traits. A woman may choose a man who reflects her animus projection, a powerful or wise masculine archetype. But these projections are not sustainable. Sooner or later they crumble and the real person emerges. What happens next is critical. Do we integrate the projection and learn to love the actual person? Or do we run, unable to face the reality of the mirror we once adored? The soul does not seek static happiness, it seeks wholeness. This wholeness often requires conflict, disillusionment, and even rupture. Marriage can facilitate that wholeness, but only if both partners are willing to let the ego die. Most are not. Most cling to being right, to emotional safety, to old wounds. And so, instead of a sacred union, marriage becomes a battle between two unconscious egos, both projecting, both reacting, both spiritually asleep. We must also examine the collective unconscious, those inherited beliefs and archetypes that shape our understanding of marriage. For centuries, marriage was about survival, economics, and social structure. Love was a later, romantic addition. But in the modern world, we want it all: passion, partnership, spiritual alignment, sexual fulfillment, emotional security, financial cooperation, and shared parenting. That is a heavy load for one relationship to bear. Perhaps marriage fails so often not because people are broken, but because the expectations placed upon the union are impossibly high and unconsciously defined. Jungian psychology asks us to become conscious of our internal dynamics. If we are unaware of our own projections, we will blame our partner for what is unresolved within ourselves. Every unhealed wound becomes a lens through which we distort our partner's behavior. Every unmet need becomes a silent expectation. Over time, the relationship buckles under the weight of unconscious material. This is why self-awareness is not optional. It is essential. In some cases, both individuals in a marriage are evolving, but not in the same direction. Their paths diverge, not because of hatred or betrayal, but because their souls require different lessons. In such cases, ending the marriage is not abandonment. It is alignment. It is the painful but necessary recognition that to stay would be to shrink, and to leave is to honor the inner calling of the soul. This is not failure. This is sacred release. There are those who will stay in a loveless marriage for decades, wearing smiles in public and dying quietly inside. Their children will absorb this model of emotional repression and call it normal. They will inherit the fear of truth and mistake it for loyalty. But what if true loyalty lies in honesty, even when it shatters the form? What if leaving a dead marriage is not betrayal, but liberation, not just for yourself, but for the generations watching? Still, for some couples, lifelong marriage is not only possible, it is deeply healing. These are the unions where both partners are committed to truth, growth, and vulnerability. They hold space for each other's pain. They face the shadow together. They love not the mask, but the soul beneath it. And they continue to choose each other, not out of habit, but out of awakened reverence. This is rare. This is possible. But it is earned through depth work and emotional courage. Jung taught that every relationship is a chance to encounter the self. When we fall in love, we are not just meeting another person. We are meeting parts of ourselves that were asleep. That initial spark, that magnetic pull, is not random. It is the psyche recognizing something sacred. But sacred does not mean easy. In fact, the most sacred relationships are often the most turbulent, because they awaken the deepest transformation. It is time we stop asking, how long did it last, and begin asking, what did it awaken? Time is a poor metric for depth. A moment of soul recognition can be more transformative than decades of polite cohabitation. The world does not need more couples who stay together out of fear. It needs more couples who awaken together, or lovingly part when the soul calls them to. To say that marriage is or isn't for life is to miss the point. The better question is, what is marriage for? If it is for validation, image, or safety, then yes, it may crumble. But if it is for truth, reflection, and awakening, then it may evolve endlessly, either within the form or beyond it. The form is not sacred, the soul is, and the soul cannot be caged by dogma. In a world obsessed with guarantees, we must embrace the mystery. No one can promise forever, not honestly. We can only promise presence. I will meet you here, in this moment, fully. I will walk with you until the path changes, and if it does, I will bless your path as I walk mine. This is real love, not control, not possession, but reverence. Jung believed that integration, the process of making the unconscious conscious, was the key to inner peace. In marriage, this means seeing not just the light in our partner, but the shadow. It means holding space for each other's wounds without rescuing or blaming. It means being mirrors for growth, not prisons of expectation. This is not romantic fantasy. This is psychological reality. There is great dignity in staying. There is great dignity in leaving. What matters is not the choice, but the consciousness behind it. If you stay because you are afraid to leave, you are not free. If you leave because you are afraid to stay, you are also not free. But if you choose from alignment, from truth, from self-awareness, then you are honoring your soul, and that is sacred. We must let go of the idea that ending a marriage is a shameful failure. Sometimes the most courageous thing we can do is to admit that the chapter has ended. And sometimes the most courageous thing we can do is to stay and fight, not for the marriage, but for the truth within it. Either path requires bravery. Either path can be an act of love. Jung warned that what we do not bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fate. Many marriages are undone not by incompatibility, but by unconscious sabotage, by unspoken resentment, by inherited trauma, by childhood wounds replayed. To heal the marriage, we must heal the self. There is no other way. Every love story is a mirror. Some are brief flashes of insight, others are long journeys through shadow and light. All are meaningful. All are sacred. The soul does not waste time, it only teaches. If your marriage is teaching you, even through pain, it is serving its purpose. But if it has become a tomb for your spirit, then something must shift. You are not here to fulfill someone else's script. You are here to awaken. And marriage, whether it lasts a lifetime or a season, is simply one of the many sacred arenas in which that awakening unfolds.